The billionaire stood in the shadows of the parking lot, the hem of his ragged, oil-stained agbada soaked by the sudden Lagos downpour. He watched through the gold-rimmed glass doors as the man he once called his son raised a crystal flute of champagne. Toby looked radiant in his white tuxedo, standing beside the senator's daughter, a woman who had no idea that the man she was marrying was built on a foundation of lies. The old man clutched a small gift wrapped in a faded newspaper. He had no idea that in less than an hour, his presence would cause a scandal that would trend across the nation. He had no idea that the secret he carried in his pocket would decide whether this multi-million naira marriage would end in a kiss or a curse. But here is what haunted him. The look of pure, unadulterated shame in his son's eyes when their gazes finally met. This is El Marem's Stories, where stories don't just inspire, they transform how you see life. We are on a journey to 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. If these stories touch your heart, join the family, hit subscribe, and let's rise together. The afternoon sun hung lazily over the Grand Marquis in Victoria Island, a place where the grass is trimmed with surgical precision and the air is perfumed with the scent of imported lilies. Inside, the wedding of Toby Bankole and Vanessa Williams was in full swing, a symphony of popping champagne corks and the rustle of expensive lace. It was a gathering of the who's who of Lagos, a place where your value was measured by the length of your convoy and the brand of your wristwatch. Among the sea of designers and high society politicians moved Amina. She was 24, a junior nurse at Luth, and the bride's younger cousin. Amina was a quiet soul, a woman whose beauty didn't scream for attention but sat calmly in the warmth of her eyes. While the other bridesmaids were busy taking selfies and comparing the carats in their jewelry, Amina's mind was elsewhere. She was thinking of the elderly man she had seen earlier near the service entrance. She noticed him again through the panoramic glass windows. The rain was beginning to fall now, a sudden, violent Lagos downpour that turned the dusty parking lot into a sea of red mud. The old man, whom the world saw only as a beggar, was shivering. He held a small gift wrapped in a faded newspaper, trying to shield it from the water with his own body. "Oga, get back, I said move." A sharp voice cut through the rhythmic patter of the rain. It was the Malin security lead, a man who took pride in keeping trash away from treasure. He shoved the old man's shoulder, causing him to stumble toward a puddle. "I am not a beggar," the old man whispered, his voice barely audible over the thunder. "I just want to see Toby. Today is a big day for him." "Toby doesn't know people like you," the guard laughed. Amina couldn't watch any longer. Ignoring the protests of her fellow bridesmaids who warned her not to stain her dress, she grabbed a sturdy umbrella and a warm plate of jollof rice from the buffet. She stepped out into the storm, the hem of her expensive silk dress soaking up the muddy water instantly. "Baba, please," she said softly, holding the umbrella over the old man. "Don't mind them. Come and sit under the generator shed. It's dry there." The old man looked up at her, and for a moment the world stopped. He saw the sincerity in her eyes, the kind of look people usually reserve for their own kin. "Daughter, your dress, it is ruined," he said, gesturing to the mud on her gown. Amina smiled, a genuine, heart-deep smile. "Silk can be washed, Baba, but a cold heart is much harder to clean. Take this food, it is hot, and you look like you haven't eaten since the sun rose." She sat with him on a cold plastic crate, tucked away from the prying eyes of the elite. She didn't know she was sitting with a man who could buy the entire marquee 10 times over. She didn't know that her simple act of mercy was the final piece of evidence in a trial that would destroy her cousin's lies. She just knew that an elder was cold, and she had the means to make him warm. "Why do you do this?" the old man asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Everyone else looks at me and sees a ghost. You look at me and see a man." Amina sighed, looking toward the bright lights of the party. "Because my mother taught me that we are all just one bad day away from being the person we cross the street to avoid. Today I am the one with the umbrella. Tomorrow it might be you." Samuel nodded slowly, his fingers trembling as he took the first bite of the rice. He looked at the newspaper-wrapped gift in his lap. He had come here to give his son a clock, but this girl, she had given him back his faith in humanity. While Amina was wiping the rain from the old man's brow, the scene inside the marquee was a masterclass in deception. Toby stood at the center of a circle of senators and oil tycoons, laughing at a joke he didn't quite understand, his eyes constantly darting to the entrance. He felt like a tightrope walker who had just realized the wire was made of thread. What the world saw in Toby was a self-made tech genius, the son of a wealthy London-based merchant. But the reality was a parallel world that began 60 years ago in the village of Isua, Ondo State. The man sitting on the crate outside, Chief Samuel Bankole, wasn't a beggar. He was the silent architect of Toby's entire life. 6 months prior, Samuel had sat in his glass-walled penthouse in Canary Wharf, London. He was looking at a report from his private investigators. It showed Toby, the boy he had sent to Oxford with money earned from the sweat of his brow, was telling the elite of Lagos that his father was dead. Toby was erasing the man who had sold his only car, his only land, and even his late wife's gold jewelry just to pay for Toby's first-class ticket to a better life. Samuel didn't get angry. He got curious. He wanted to know, at what price does a man sell his soul to fit in? He had returned to Nigeria in secret, leaving his security detail at a 5-star hotel in Ikeja. He had spent the last 7 days living as a nobody. He had slept in a crowded hostel in Yaba, where the mosquitoes sang in his ears. He had stood in line at government hospitals. He had been splashed by the mud of the very roads his company had been contracted to pave. He was looking for one thing: the truth. He had deliberately chosen his son's wedding day for the final test. He wanted to see if Toby, at the pinnacle of his social climbing, would acknowledge the roots that gave him his height. "Chief," a voice whispered in Samuel's ear. It was James, his head of security, who had approached the generator shed disguised as a common driver. "The senator is about to announce the merger of your son's company with the Williams Holding Group. They're using the 500 million naira you anonymously invested in Toby's firm as his personal equity." Samuel looked at the plate of rice Amina had given him. "He is selling my blood and calling it his sweat, James." "Shall we move in, sir?" James asked, his hand hovering over his radio. "Not yet," Samuel replied, his eyes following Amina as she walked back into the hall, her mud-stained dress a badge of honor in a room full of fake gold. "I want to see the toast. I want to hear the lie from his own lips. Only then will the truth have the power to set him free or break him." The irony was a cold wind. Inside, Toby was about to sign a marriage certificate that would link him to the senator's fortune, unaware that the senator was only interested in Toby because of the mysterious wealth Samuel had provided. Toby was a puppet who thought he was the puppeteer. Inside the hall, the air was vibrating with the sound of a high society celebration, but for Toby, the music had started to sound like a funeral march. He stood at the head table, his hand trembling as he reached for a glass of water. Every time the heavy oak doors at the back of the hall creaked open, his heart skipped a beat. He was a man who had built a kingdom on a lie, and he could feel the first cracks forming beneath his feet. The senator, Vanessa's father, stood up to deliver the great toast. He was a man who loved the sound of his own power. He topped his microphone and the room fell into a respectful, expensive silence. "Today," the senator boomed, his voice echoing off the crystal chandeliers, "we don't just witness a marriage, we witness the union of two dynasties. Toby Bankole is a man of rare pedigree, the son of the late great Chief Bankole of London, a man who understood that class is not bought, it is inherited." Toby nodded, a forced smile plastered on his face. But then he saw her. Amina had returned to the hall. Her silk dress was stained with red Lagos mud, and she was walking straight toward the head table. The guests began to whisper. In a room where perfection was the only currency, Amina looked like a walking scandal. "Amina, what happened to you?" Vanessa hissed, her eyes darting to the senator, who looked visibly annoyed. "You look like you've been rolling in the gutters." "I was helping someone," Amina said, her voice calm and clear. She looked Toby directly in the eyes. "Toby, there is an old man outside. He's cold, he's wet, and he's holding a gift for you. He says he knows you." Toby's face went from pale to a ghostly white. I told you, Amina, I don't know any beggars. He's a scammer, probably someone from the village trying to extort money because they saw the wedding on Instagram." "He didn't ask for money," Amina countered, pulling a small object from her clutch bag. "He asked me to give you this. He said you would recognize it." She placed a small hand-carved wooden clock on the table. It was simple, rustic, and completely out of place next to the $5,000 centerpiece. Toby's breath hitched. He knew that wood. It was mahogany from the tree behind his childhood home, the tree his father used to sit under while teaching him his first words. "What is this trash?" Vanessa asked, reaching to toss it aside. "Wait," the senator interrupted, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the base of the clock. "There's a photograph taped to the bottom." The senator pulled the photo away. It was a grainy 20-year-old picture of a younger Samuel Bancole standing proudly next to a teenage Toby on his graduation day. The senator's hand began to shake. He looked at the photo, then at the beggar he had seen being shoved by security earlier, and finally at Toby. "Toby," the senator's voice was now a low, dangerous rumble. "You told me your father was a merchant who died in a car crash in London. You told me you were the sole heir to the Bancole cocoa estates." Sir, it's a misunderstanding," Toby stammered, his sweat now soaking through his $3,000 tuxedo. "That man, he's a distant relative who lost his mind. He's obsessed with me." "Then why," Amina asked softly, her voice carrying to the surrounding tables, "did he have your original birth certificate tucked inside the newspaper wrapping? And why did he cry when you called him a nuisance?" The enforcer of the truth wasn't a lawyer or a policeman. It was the heavy, suffocating silence that followed. Toby looked at the doors, hoping for a way out, but they were being held open by his father's security team. The collapse had begun, and there was no stopping the weight of the truth from coming down. The silence in the marquee was no longer peaceful. It was a vacuum, sucking the oxygen out of the room. Toby felt as though he were underwater, the faces of the Lagos elite blurring into a distorted mask of judgment. But the true storm was just arriving. Outside, the rain didn't stop, but the sound of it was suddenly drowned out by a low, rhythmic rumble. It was the sound of heavy machinery, not the generator, but the synchronized engines of 6 black Mercedes G-Wagons and a custom Rolls-Royce Cullinan. They didn't just drive up, they occupied the space. The security guards who earlier shoved the beggar now stood frozen, their mouths open as men in dark suits, tactical earpieces, and the unmistakable posture of high-level protection flooded the entrance. The heavy oak doors swung open. Samuel Bancole walked in, but the man in the mud-stained agbada was gone. In his place stood the Titan. He had shed the wet outer garment, revealing a bespoke navy blue silk suit that cost more than Toby's entire wedding budget. His posture was no longer slumped. He stood with the terrifying grace of a mountain. James, his head of security, stepped forward and placed a velvet-lined jacket over his shoulders. The senator gasped, his champagne glass slipping from his hand and shattering on the marble floor. Chief Samuel, is it really you?" Samuel didn't look at the senator. He didn't look at the cameras or the confused guests. He walked straight to the head table, his leather shoes clicking with the finality of a judge's gavel. He stopped in front of Toby. "I spent 40 years building a name so that you would never have to know the hunger I felt," Samuel said, his voice a calm, resonant bass that filled every corner of the room. "I gave you the world, Toby. I gave you the education, the capital, and the connections. But I forgot to give you the one thing money cannot buy: memory.
Toby was shaking so violently his chair rattled. "Papa, I can explain. The senator, he wouldn't understand our background. I did it for the family name." "You didn't do it for the family name," Samuel countered, his eyes cold as flint. "You did it for a seat at a table where people only like you for what you pretend to be. You denied your father to impress a man who only likes you because of the money I secretly put in your accounts." Samuel turned to the senator, who was now bowing slightly, his face a mask of panicked sycophancy. "Senator, you said you wanted a man of pedigree. Well, here is the pedigree. This boy started in a house with a leaking roof in Ondo. I am the man who harvested cocoa so he could study the stars. If my sweat is a nuisance to your family, then my money is a nuisance as well." Samuel pulled a legal folder from James's hand and dropped it on the table. It was the merger agreement. The 500 million naira investment in Toby's company, it was a gift from the Bankole Trust. As of 5 minutes ago, I have withdrawn it. The merger is dead. The wedding is over. The room erupted. Vanessa began to scream. Her father began to plead, and Toby fell to his knees, clutching at his father's trousers. But Samuel stepped back. His gaze moved to the back of the room where Amina stood, her mud-stained dress now looking like the most regal garment in the hall. "The judgment is simple, Toby. You wanted to be a man with no father? Today you have your wish. You are no longer an heir to the Bankole name. You are just a man in a borrowed suit." The music had stopped. The high society guests, once so eager to be seen with the tech prodigy, now pulled away from Toby as if his shame were contagious. The senator, realizing the Bankole fortune was gone, roughly pulled Vanessa away from the altar. "We are leaving," he hissed. "I will not have my daughter tied to a fraud and a pauper." Toby remained on the floor, his head bowed. The white tuxedo, once a symbol of his ascent, was now just a costume for a role he had lost. He looked up at his father, his voice a broken whisper. "Papa, please, where am I supposed to go?" Samuel looked down at him, not with anger, but with a profound, quiet sadness. "You go back to the beginning, Toby. You go back to the soil you tried to forget. Maybe when you have worked the land with your own hands, you will understand that a tree cannot live without its roots." Samuel turned his back on his son and walked towards Amina. The room watched in hushed awe. He stopped in front of the young nurse, whose mud-stained dress stood out among the sea of pristine silk. "Daughter," Samuel said, his voice softening, "today I saw a room full of people who worship gold, but I only found one person who worships humanity. You didn't help me because you knew I was a chief. You helped me because you thought I was a man in need." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small wooden clock Toby had discarded. He placed it in Amina's hands. "This clock is a reminder that time is the only thing we cannot buy back. You spend your days at Luth saving lives for a small salary. Today, I am changing that. I am establishing the Amina eBay Medical Foundation. I am seeding it with 2 billion naira, and you will be the director. You will decide which hospitals get equipment and which children get surgeries, because I know that in your hands, the money will find its heart." Amina's eyes filled with tears, not of greed, but of overwhelming shock. "Chief, I only gave you a plate of rice." "And that rice was the most expensive meal I have ever eaten," Samuel replied with a faint smile. "It cost me my son, but it bought me the truth." As the G-wagons pulled away from the marquee, leaving a trail of mud on the pristine driveway, the lesson of the day hung heavy over Victoria Island. Toby Bankole learned that faking it until you make it only works if you don't lose yourself in the process. He had reached for the stars by standing on his father's neck, and in the end he fell further than he ever thought possible. True wealth is not the tuxedo you wear or the senator whose hand you shake. True wealth is the character you show when you think the person in front of you can do nothing for you. Samuel was a king in rags. Toby was a beggar in silt. What is your root? What part of your past are you trying to hide today? Remember, the world may love your flowers, but it is your roots that keep you standing when the storm comes.